well, movie buffs, tomorrow is the big day. The day of the 98th Academy Awards, or as we simply call them, the Oscars. Because, and I will say that this year has a really intriguing Oscar lineup. Like, I probably one of the most interesting thing I've seen in a long time, and this especially comes to its best pick to line up. Now we have the usual 10 nominations as we usually do. And it's honestly one of the best lineups we've had all decade for best pick. And the best thing about this lineup is I was able to see all of them. Granted, it helps that there was only 3 I needed to see even when the nominations were announced. But it didn't change the fact that I did end up going around to see those 3 and rewatching all the other nominations as well. So now that we've done that, I've rewatched all of them. To prepare for this moment, let's have a little to look at each of them. Now, I'm not going to do huge reviews on each of them, especially since there were a few Begonia, F1, on Frank, and Sinister I've already done reviews for. So those will be the ones that will have the small Ola treatments. But still, it doesn't change the fact that we had a great line. I've had a lot of films to go over. So let's start off with Begonia. Yeah. Which honestly is a pretty good film. Not much has changed on me for this recent rewatch. Other than I've just thought the film was still really good. The performance is really well out there, and especially with Emma Stone. The story is quite interesting, especially when it leads to the big twist. It's that at the end of the feat, and the way this film is shot is really well done. Seriously, the production design for this film is honestly beautiful. Or what does hold this one back, however, is that I do think the film was a bit too long on certain places. Since when I was rewatching this one recently, I couldn't help but notice there were many moments that seemed to drag on for long points of time. Not to mention that not all the characters got huge development. Other than Emma Stone, her own character tended to conspiracy theorists. And that's pretty much it. It doesn't focus too much on any of the other characters, other than just put us them to the side. Also, I do like the ending. This is a good example of how the film does drag at some points. It's because, as it really does take too long to get to it. But still, it doesn't change the fact that Begonia is a solid movie. Definitely not the best of these nominations, but still a pretty good one regardless. 8 out of 10. Now let's move on to F1. And man, this is a film that improves for me on every rewatch. I absolutely love this film. Remember my top 10 best films of the year where I said I was gutted that this didn't end up on my best list? Well, rewatching it for the Oscars, because if I did it in my top 10 after the the Oscar nominations, but even me, it would definitely be on there. F1 is a fantastic movie. The racing scenes are really engaging from beginning to end, and are very thrilling to watch. Not to mention that the film has some phenomenal sound design. Seriously, this is one of those films where I don't focus too much on the sound, but I am so glad this one got nominated for best sound. And I also really hope that if this one doesn't win any of the other categories, it does at least win best sound. That's the big one I want and to win the most. Anyway, it's continuing. I just really love the main characters. Sunny Hayes and Joshua Pierce were really good and interesting characters. And I definitely love their dynamic with when, I don't know, easily one of the best things to come out of this movie. I guess it's not one of the best because as films of the year, because as the story is still not the most original thing in the world. Oh, well, basically, if you've seen any racing movie, you've kind of seen this one. But that's honestly a very minor critique. You can doesn't change the fact that F1 is a really fun and fantastic movie. And one that it does improve on me with me for every rewatch. 9.5 out of 10. Now let's move on to Frankenstein. And this is, man, I haven't seen many films from Guillermo del Toro, but this is definitely one of his best ones. And I'll say now that the film has some amazing production values. This is a beautiful looking movie from beginning to end, and the different scenes around and Victor's castle show this. They make it seem as big and as huge as it can possibly be. On top of that, the performances are phenomenal. Of course, Jacob Elordi is incredible as well as the creature, and he definitely deserves that nomination. But honestly, I think one of the biggest snubs from the Oscars this year was not nominating Oscar Isaac for Best Actor. Seriously, his performance was absolutely incredible. Easily one of my favourite performances of the year. Yeah, he brought so much into Victor to showing his rage, sadness, anger, and how he begins to lose his sanity. A very fantastic and incredible performance. Not much has changed with me on all these recent rewatches. Just as I do still think it has the similar pros and cons. I do think the film spent a bit too much time on Victor's side of the story. And I do feel like some of the other side characters needed a bit more development. But honestly, if I'm honest, listening to this rewatch, I was surprised to find that I really like the characterization of the cat. Acting that Victor turned the creature tell their story to. It showing how the story ends up ending the cat action's personality. Take from a bit of grumpy man and focus on finishing in his voyage with his crew, to at the end where he decides to not only let the creature go, but do it was the best thing for this man and head home. 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 It's honestly a really solid character arc for a minor character. Other than that, Frankenstein is easily one of Guillermo del Toro's best works. If you haven't seen it yet, I highly recommend you do so. Oh, it is wonderful. 9.5 out of 10. Now we move on to the first one of these that I've yet to review, Hamlet. No, and I got to be honest, a part of me is really disappointed with this one. I mean, I like the film, but there is so much that's stopping me from loving it. But I will start out with the positive tips, and that just being that the film has some amazing performances. It's especially with as Buckley. Her performance is incredible, but all throughout the entire film, and if there's anyone in the best actress category that deserves to win the Oscar, it's definitely her. Her performance is absolutely fantastic from beginning to end, and I also really like most of the characters. This is especially the case with the main son Hamlet. Now the film it's not subtle of what's going to happen to him. It's clear that he's going to end up dying. However, but they still find a way to make the moment emotional or by show that Hamlet is just a really good kid. The fact that he actually sacrificed himself also that his sister could live on is honestly quite touching and beautiful, or as he takes her illness away and gives it to him. And I will say that the ending scene in with William's play is really well done. Not to mention that the film has some amazing production values. This is another one. Where visually the film does us look absolutely stunning. From beginning to end. And however, what really does hold this one back is that I just didn't care much about the story. If I gotta be honest, I was pretty bored throughout it. Don't get me wrong, there were things I was really liking about this movie, and I definitely couldn't say it was bad. It's just the main storyline was something that did stop me from absolutely loving the film, which is a shame because the trailers I saw for this film and the positive word of mouth really got me excited. This is one of those films where I really wanted to love it, but its main story was what held it back for me. Don't get me wrong, Hamlet is a really good movie. I'm not denying that. There are a lot of positives I do have with this movie. Movie like the performances, is in the production values. But when I'm looking at all the other content, and it's definitely one of the weaker ones. Not a bad one by any means, but not going to be one of the best out there. But it still has some solid positives to come for it. So I'll give it a 7.5 out of 10. And now let's move on to Marty Supreme. A film that many people have been loving and consider one of the best films of the year. And me, yeah, it's really good. But I don't think I love this one. Mainly because I think this film just goes on too long. The feature jumps from different parts of the storyline. I'm quite often, where it does make it hard for me to properly keep up with everything that is happening and everything that is actually going on in the main story. Yeah, I honestly do think it's got an interesting story. Or about this tennis ball, or this player that wants to be seen as the best, but as is shown to be an arrogant jack. But with how the film does us make too many twists and turns, and then goes on for a bit too long, it does stop me from getting fully invested with the story. However, but that doesn't mean I think that this film is bad at all. And there are still so many positives. For one, I love Timothée Chalamet's performance as Marty. Many people have been saying that he should definitely win Best Actor, and I would honestly agree. It's clear that Marty is supposed to be a terrible person, and Timothy worked with that perfectly. He's showing the character's cockiness and arrogance, where he wants everything to go his way. All the other actors do really well with their performances, don't get me wrong. But Chalamet was easily the film standout. Also, the feature has some amazing editing, especially in the tennis scenes. In the way the film is edited, each of them is highly well done, and where it goes from one player's perspective to another, and seeing the way the ball goes around them in these scenes is honestly really good. Also, I actually like some of the needle drops in this movie. They're nothing spectacular or anything, but they are still quite solid regardless. So overall, while Marty Supreme isn't going to be seen as one of my favourites of the Oscars, that doesn't change the fact that I still thought this was a really good and solid movie. Regardless, now I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. And next up, we have One Battle After Another. And I'm just going to say this is easily my favourite of the nominations. This film is absolutely phenomenal. No, like I said in my best film of the year video, the movie's main conflict doesn't really kick in until Alan defeat where Bob has to go find Willa. However, it does not feel like it's that long. Well, the film has a really long runtime at 2 hours and 42 minutes. And while I admit I did feel it in some parts, for the most part, the film is really well paced. Where it doesn't really feel that long, as the time does fly by quite quick. Actually with Bob's arch from Willa, they'll be very engaging. Also, many have said this, but Willa is easily the heart of the feature. The fact that after he still tries to keep on fighting no matter what, it is inspiring, and that's definitely noticeable in Chase Infinity's performance. But all the other actors here were really good, especially with Leonardo DiCaprio's Bob. But Chase Infinity was easily one of the film's standouts. But another performance that was a standout was easily Sean Penn as Steve Lockjaw. Man, what an incredible villain. Then his motivations are quite simple, which is just to be part of this club called the Christmas Adventurers. But man, And there are so many layers, especially with the possibility that Willa might be his daughter, so which could cost him from being a member. Hence why he's after the Willa and has to try bury the evidence. And he's a fan, fantastically written to villain, and Sean Penn does a fantastic job of bringing this character to life. I think the best way he can, and I also say the film does a great job of balancing many different tones. And I was surprised where it can go from super dramatic to super funny in some moments, and it never feels like it's a tone whiplash. So it doesn't manage to just mix all these tones together in a way that makes sense and fits the narrative. And man, this film is a visual masterpiece. I was loving nearly every visual shot in this feature, and I was easily put all in. So yeah, many people have been calling one battle after another one of their favourites of the year, and I can honestly understand. Why? Well, it's still not my favourite film of 2025, as I still prefer films like Undervotes, K-pop Demon Hunters, and Wicked for Good a bit more. That still doesn't change the fact that I had a phenomenal time with one battle after another, and that's why I'm giving the film a 10 out of 10. Now let's move on to The Secret Agent, probably the film where I have the most interesting feelings about it. I've seen many people call this one of the weaker nominations, and I can definitely understand where they are coming from. But there are still some great positives I do have with this one, and the story was a lot more about the subject of films than I was expecting, but I thought that wasn't a surprise. And it does do a good job of using that as a sort of narrative. On top of that, the film is visually nice to look at. Maybe not my favourite looking film of the year, but the visual design does do a good job of bringing the film to life. The film also has some really solid performances, especially with Matt Wagner Moore as the lead. So yeah, there are some solid things about this film, but there are also quite a few things that does hold this one back for me. And that would mainly be due to the film's running time of 2 hours and 40 minutes. And I'm just going to say, no, this film does not need to be that long. The film is constantly dragged out, and even if there are some moments of times on front of runtime that does fly, other times the film just feels way too long. And I found myself being very disinterested as did with the entire feature, which I thought or what was a bit of a shame. Sadly, like that. Actually, when and it definitely does affect the story, but I did find it hard to keep up with it with the slow pacing and how the film constantly drags out. Also, the film has a huge cast of characters, but other than the lead, I did not really care about many of them. There were characters I did like, but they didn't have enough time to show themselves. So yeah, The Secret Agent isn't a great movie. I can definitely understand why people call it one of the weaker nominations. But I still thought this one was pretty good. But even though it is incredibly flawed. Which is why I'll give the film a 7.5 out of 10. Now let's move on to sentimental value. And man, if there's anything that's gonna win best international feature, it's definitely got to be this one. And Film has a really solid heart to it, and that's the relationship between his father, who's a movie director, and his two daughters. So it's where he wants to try make things up with them, and tries to cast one of them in his movie where the daughter is hesitant because she has her own issues going on. It's honestly a really solid narrative that does stay strong for the entire feature. On top of that, the film has some stellar performances. Each one of the actors did do a great job with their performances. It's in bringing in their characters to life in an all new and exciting way. Which I did really like. And I actually like the personalities of all these characters. As each one of them has some interest. I think arcs, especially the relationship between either dad and his main daughter. And I honestly did like it. The film is held back for me with a few flaws, though. That does stop this from being even one of 2025 best films. That I did not really care about the relationship between the two sisters because the film doesn't really focus too much on that. It focuses a nice amount on the sister's relationship with the father, but it does not do a good job of showing the relationship between the two sisters on their own. Also, while Ella Fanning does deliver a really good performance, but I honestly thought her character was kind of a bit unnecessary. Really, they could have found out anyone else to do what she did, and that would be fine. Doesn't mean that I didn't like Helen Fanning. In this one, I did, and she did deliver a good performance. It's just there were many better actors and characters that could have fit this role. But other than that, it doesn't change the fact that I still had a really solid time with it. If this movie sentimental value isn't one of my favourites, but it was pretty close to be. It has a really solid heart and some strong on-character development from beginning to end. If it focused a bit more on the relationship between the two sisters, then I do think it would easily be one of last year's best films. 8.5 out of 10. Now let's move on to Sinners, the big one. The one that broke the record to get the most Oscar nominations. And I am so glad that this is a film that's improved for me on rewatch. Now there are a few things about it that do stay the same. And most of my big positives I had when I reviewed this film back in October do still stay strong. Like performances, it is the use of black representation and the score. But one thing I ended up really liking on my most recent rewatch were the vampires. I was surprised to find that they became really interesting villains, because I didn't really care about them when I watched this movie the first two times. But after this most recent rewatch, I ended up really liking the vampires because I'm caring about their side of the story, or be as well. And this leads to an incredible fact, which I'm not ashamed to say is pretty much flawless. I guess I can't say the rest of the film. It was the perfect masterpiece that many have been calling it. It still does have its own flaws that hold it back. But that doesn't change the fact that I had a fantastic time with Sinners, and it is definitely a film that I am glad I did improve on this most recent rewatch. And who knows, maybe if I watch it again, it will become a masterpiece for me. The only time will tell, but what on this review is that I've moved my rating up on this one until to a 9 out of 10. And now we move on to the final of the nominations, Train Dreams. And I'm gonna be honest, this is my least favourite of the nominations. Since the film isn't bad per se, it is a decent film, but it's not really one I care too much about. Because I'm just gonna be honest, this had a really dull story. Was it bad? Of course not. But the story just felt very slow. Always at moments, and I didn't get a real enough into the main character in his life. Also, the narrator really held this film back. I probably would have put it higher, but the narrator did get annoying for me when I rewatched this film. Which I did, it felt I was a bit of a shame. And speaking of rewatching, I was really hoping that this would be one of those films that improved for me on rewatch. I really hope so, but it's not. But I did find a few more problems with it. But there are still quite a few positives I do have with this film. For one, the performances are really good. Other than each of the actors do really well, and man, and this film easily has some of the best cinematography of the year. This is a gorgeous looking movie from beginning to end, where I loved almost every shot that was presented in the film. And whether it be with the lighting, or the way the camera was used, I found myself to be pretty flawed. Or for the entire film. So yeah, it'll by its production. So yeah, Train Dreams is not a bad movie in the slightest. But if I was going to judge all these nominations, and if I was the Academy, I don't think I would have put this in the lineup for Best Picture. There are things that I did really love about this one, but it's just not really one where I'm in a rush to watch this one again. And that's why I'm giving this film a 6 out of 10. And that's my thoughts on all the nominations for Best Picture. And I'm gonna say, this wasn't so long enough. There were definitely films I liked more than others, but it doesn't change the fact that I really like many films. It was that were not asked to be part of this lineup. Not regard. Artless. As for which one I think is going to win, I think many people will come to the same conclusion as me. Of that being, it's going to be between either one battle after another, but Sinners. It's easy got to come down to one of those two. And I don't think I would mind on which one would win. But hey, if it does end up not turning out to be one of those two, then another one I would want to win would be Frankenstein. But yeah, those are just my thoughts. And we'll only have to wait and see which one ends up getting the Oscar, as well as all the other nominations in all the other categories. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Feel free to comment, like, and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Bye!